Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We're going to give everybody a chance to join before we get started. Going to give everyone just one extra minute before we get going. Um, Alrighty, let's go ahead because we have so much to discuss tonight and I don't want to waste too much time as everyone's joining in. But let me say good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Hudson Library and Historical Society author series. Tonight, we are so honored to welcome Barbara Butcher, author of What the Dead Know, learning about life as a New York City death investigator, which I have to say, spoiler, I loved. Before we get started, I just want to please remind everyone to check out all of our upcoming programs at the Hudson Library at hudsonlibrary.org. We have so many exciting programs, virtual, in person, you name it. You would love to check them out, and we'd love to have you all here. You also can purchase copies of What the Dead Know from our local independent bookstore here in Hudson, the Learned Owl. We'll have a direct link, should be in the chat, for you to purchase tonight. At any point during the event, you can feel free to ask questions and leave them in the Q&A section, and we will try to address as many as possible tonight. Now that that's all taken care of, let me introduce tonight's speaker. Barbara Butcher was Chief of Staff and Director of the Forensic Science Training Program at New York City Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. She was responsible for overall agency management, strategy, interagency relations, and so much more. She is a renowned expert in the medical legal death investigation after spending 23 years at New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner. Some of her responsibilities included death investigations, disaster planning, victim identification, evidence, and missing persons. She oversaw the remains recovery effort at the World Trade Center site after 9/11, helped manage a response to the crash of Flight 587, and investigated the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center. She's consulted internationally for the World Health Organization on responding to the 2004 tsunami in Thailand, London Underground bombing, as well as disaster planning for several countries. Her book, What the Dead Know, came out this June to rave reviews. And Barbara, I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. Boy, that's a long introduction. I was awfully busy, wasn't I?
I mean, I tried to condense it, but your life you've done so much. It's very hard to sum up.
Death is a growth industry, so there's always plenty to do for everyone. Plenty of jobs, folks, plenty of jobs.
I would love, I just want to give a heads up for everyone. If you haven't read this book, again, I want to say I absolutely loved it. I found it so fascinating and inspiring. I just want to give you a general heads up for some viewers that there's some sensitive topics in the book. So, but I just want to say truly I found the whole thing rather inspirational and moving. And I was wondering if you could start off by just giving a brief description of the book for some of our viewers who might not have read it before we get started and dive in.
Sure. This book started out to be just the stories of the interesting cases I had seen over the years. I was a death investigator and then director of this or that or the other thing in forensics for 23 years. I saw an awful lot. So when I started writing the book, I thought, oh, let me tell people about all these cool and strange things that have happened, these wacky homicides and strange accidents. And then as I was writing it, I started to get upset. I started to feel things. It wasn't just a cool case. I started to remember how it felt to see those things. And my publisher said to me, my editor said, hey, where are you in the book? I said, I'm right here. He said, no, I got to see you. I got to see what you did, how you felt, what it smelled like, what it looked like. I said, oh, I get it. So I rewrote everything to be the story of not just the cases, but of my life then, of what happened to me, of how I got this crazy job, how I managed as a woman in a man's business. Let's face it, this is back in 92 when I started, and they hadn't, they had hired one woman before me, but she ran out screaming after 3 months. So I was the first one to last in the job for a while in Manhattan. So as I, was writing the book, all the feelings came up, and, I talked about it. And I think I spoke pretty honestly about what it was like, and how it changed me as a person, what it taught me too.
I can see why you had to push feelings aside while you were dealing with the cases, because being able to process that in real time would have been a lot.
Sure.
See why
Sure.
writing this would have been
A lot.
yeah.
And there's, so many times I would walk into a scene and like see a young woman and a kid dead, murdered. And the first feeling that would wash over me is horror and dismay and sadness and grief and pain. And I'd have to shut that down quick, because I'm no good to the decedent, to the victim, if I can't work forensically and logically and detach myself from my own human feelings and become a scientist. I owe it to them. I have to get them justice, and I have to get answers for their families. So I shut it down real hard.
Your respect and dedication to the victims and to the deceased and helping them find justice is clearly evident throughout the book, as well as your desire to help their families, the living, and the dedication to that could not have been an easy road or job
No,
to have, but you speak with it about such passion that's inspiring. I was
thank
wondering if
you.
you could just start off, like, a lot of how you got to your career and everything is a interesting road. I was wondering, one of the things I picked up in the book is you've always had such a natural curiosity that comes out through the book from your childhood. You grew up with a father who was a police officer, and it seemed like you always had an interest in science.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like, even though you maybe your road to becoming a death investigator took you some other ways, it feels like it was a natural progression from your childhood to
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that.
Sure. When I was a kid, I loved science, and I was always curious. No, I'll go beyond that. I was nosy. I had to know the why of everything. I was a nosy little devil. And I got a dissecting kit and a microscope for my birthday. It was very exciting. And I got a frog in formaldehyde that I could dissect and see what made it work, the muscles, the organs. And then the kids in the neighborhood started bringing me roadkill, like a possum or something, where I could say, oh, you see the little zigzag black lines across his back? That's tire treads. So his little rib cage got crushed by a tire, and this is how he died. So I started out pretty young with that. And, my little scientist dreams kind of got messed up when I started drinking as a teenager. Yeah, I had a bit of a rough time, and I was drinking everything from mouthwash to cheap wine. So things didn't go too well for a while. But then, I don't know, maybe someone inspired me. In fact, a nurse that I worked for, she inspired me. And she said, come on, you're a smart girl. Why are you hanging around here in a nursing home stocking the shelves? You should be out studying something. And she told me about the job of physician assistant. So I did it. Applied to college. I became a PA, worked in surgery, had a great job, worked in hospital administration, and everything was going great. And then I started drinking again. And sure enough, I was an alcoholic, and things all fell apart. And then one day, it was all too much for me, and I got sober. I woke up on the floor, tangled in the sweaty sheets, and said, what the hell happened to me? I got up, I got sober. And in New York State, one of the things you get when you have a disease like alcoholism is services. And they had a service called EPRA, the Employment Program for Recovering Alcoholics. And there they gave me all the Minnesota multiphasic preferential Myers-Briggs tests. And at the end of it, my counselor said, you should be a poultry veterinarian or a coroner. I said, poultry? What the hell? Why? He said, well, you get emotionally attached to your patients. It's not good for you. And if you worked with puppies and kittens, it would break your heart. But chickens, beady eyes, nobody cares about chickens. I said, no, I'll take dead people. So he told me to call the one person in New York City who had the best job in the world. And I did. I called Dr. Charles Hirsch, the chief medical examiner, and asked him for an informational interview. And I went in and I met them and I saw what they were doing there, the investigation of death. It was so exciting. And they offered me a job. It was like a dream come true. So the misfortune of alcoholism landed me my dream job. They gave me the training. I had the education background. The next thing you know, I was out in the streets with NYPD investigating homicides and having an absolute ball. It was the most exciting, interesting, compelling work. And it was also satisfying because I could help people. You know, I was a little late to the game because they were already dead, but at least I could get answers and justice. So I loved every second of that job. Every second, even when it became soul crushing. Even when I discovered that you can't just detach from one feeling. You can't just turn off grief and sorrow. They all go off. And then relationships go screwy and friendships get messed up. And next thing you know, you're isolated, alone, depressed, and thinking about drinking. But the rest of it's in the book.
I will say, from reading the book, the one thing I was like, I think I told someone as I was reading, I was like, I think she has the best job, which, I mean, I think it's because your passion for the job is so, just jumps off of every page, even when being very frank about all the struggles. It's just
Yeah.
someone that loved what they did and loved being able to help and being
Yeah.
able to provide something for people in need. We've spoke about your job, but I was wondering, so this is the field you went into. I'm sure, I won't say all, but I'm sure most of us wagered bet all, but have watched some sort of criminal investigation show.
Yeah.
I feel like the field, your job, is something we've seen on TV, but from reading the book and hearing a bit about it, the reality is much different. I was wondering if you could describe, for those of us who feel like maybe we're armchair experts, just a bit about what the job entails.
Well, you know, first of all, the TV shows, they have to exaggerate it like crazy to make it compelling and fast, like that you get DNA results in 15 minutes so that there's some huge electronic map that can track people all through the city. It's not true. But what they can't show is the absolute surreal horror and strangeness of some of the ways that people die. I mean, to walk in a room where a woman's been, where her husband had a jealous attack and beat her to death, and there's just blood from the ceiling to the walls to the floors. That's something I can't get out of my head. To see people who play little sex games with, you know, masks and smothering and bondage and things, and then it goes wrong. You know, bad boy games, mistakes get made, and boom, someone dies during a little sex game. All the strange things I saw, every strange death was counterbalanced by the fact that I got to see how people live. And it's not just, you and I probably, most of us live in a home or an apartment with decent furniture and some food in the refrigerator and, a television and maybe a pet. That's not the way it is for everyone. I've been to penthouses in the sky filled with art and, ridiculously expensive furniture. And then an hour later, crawl beneath the foundation of an abandoned building to pull out some poor junkie who's, overdosed in a pile of trash. Or the caves beneath New York. They talk about the mole people. There are people who actually live in the tunnels and caves beneath the city. And they don't live like rats. Some of them have actual furnished caves. I went down into the caves with a couple of cops and a young sex worker who wanted to make a deal with the cops. She said, "You let me go on this drug charge, and I'll show you where there's a homicide victim in the caves." And we explored all through the tunnels and the caves. And I saw people had like a bed and a little armchair, a bookshelf, and even a poster on the wall. One time I saw a poster for Dubonnet, the liqueur. I had the same poster at home, but mine wasn't hammered into a piece of rock in the side of a cave. And I was just awestruck by the way that people live. It's so different. And what was funny is the young sex worker, she was a very smart girl, very pretty. And she said to one of the detectives, "Can you excuse me a minute? I need to pee. I'll go over there behind the side of that tunnel." He said, "Okay," walked over with her. And next thing I hear is, "Hey, you, come back. What the hell? What are you doing?" Well, it turns out that she said to him, "Oh, would you mind turning around?" And he's a gentleman, so he did. And as soon as he did, she took off and escaped. Of course, they picked her up 2 days later in a hot sheet motel. But, we had some fun. We had fun.
The moment of connection, whether you're in the penthouse with all of the paintings you were describing, like a great master, like just ridiculous, to being in the abandoned Amtrak tunnels. I mean, there's always a point of something that's connecting. Like I'm not connecting, but I guess in a sense that like you recognizing humanity and the lessons you can learn. And there's just, you say a lot that the dead, something to the effect of, I should have wrote it down exactly, like the dead always, something the dead speak if you were willing to listen, and
Yeah.
about the humanity and connecting with you. And it was very, while wildly different to hear the different experiences, there was some humanity factor, like wanting their comforts and all of that.
Yeah. I think that more important than seeing the death was seeing the lives of people. And sometimes they were tragic. New York is a very lonely town. If you want to disappear, this is where you want to be left alone, you come to New York. You can be surrounded by people and yet still be so alone. And I think I saw so much of that. And, I talked about the woman, the Holocaust survivor who committed suicide, jumped from her roof. And when I saw the numbers tattooed on her arm from Auschwitz, I was so stricken with, it's as if history came and smacked me in the face. It's one thing to read about it, but then to see an actual victim, it made me dizzy. I was overwhelmed by the feeling of it. And then just looking at her and thinking, wow, you survived the Holocaust, you survived a concentration camp, you came to America, you've lived, and now why would you die at the age of 80 something? Why commit suicide now? What could have happened? And I never knew. Her apartment was so empty, so lonely. There was nothing in there. And maybe it was finally loneliness that led her to leave. And I think that's where I learned things, not from investigating deaths, but from investigating lives. I was very privileged, and it suited my nosiness quite well, of course, because I have to see everything.
Well, I think that general curiosity or nosiness was a skill. I mean, it was something that you talked about as a child, and it was clear through your job, and it was actually incredibly useful in your career to be inquisitive and to be like, to want to know to that, to just not just know how people are died, but how they live, so you can, a better way to honor them. I was wondering, you talk a lot, when we talked a bit about what your job entailed, and how it was so important to find out how people lived. One of the other things I thought was very interesting is you had to remain so neutral in cases, and or when you come in. And I think that was one thing that maybe it feels like sometimes on the TV shows and all of that, they don't do a great job. Like from everything from when you get a call, there's just been a death, not a homicide, because it was up to you to make that determination. Um, you had the one case, I think, that was fascinating, that it appeared as a homicide, with the shell casings and everything, but through your natural curiosity, you were able to uncover a bit more.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I forgot I was talking about the TV show. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, they're not real. They're fun, but they're not real. Yeah, the importance of neutrality. I'm not working for the prosecution. I'm not working for the police. I'm working for justice, and that's a neutral concept. I'm not looking to accuse anyone, but rather to gather all the evidence. And one time I was called to a tenement apartment on the Upper West Side, one of those where the stairway's coming down into the hallway, and then the hall goes out to the back to like an alleyway. And at the foot of the stairs, there was a guy laying crumpled with a nice bullet hole in his head. And the guy said to me, Barbara, there's some kind of wacky murder here. Look, there's shell casings all over the floor, 22 caliber. And he's got a nice little hole in his head. And when I looked at the hole, it didn't have the abrasion ring that you would normally get as a bullet entered. It splits the skin and it abrades the skin around it as it enters. He didn't have that. And then I was looking around the wall, and I noticed that just in front of the stairway where he landed, the wall came to a corner, and it had that stone coping at the bottom, like molding. And it came to a point. And when I looked closely at the point, I saw blood. And then I looked more closely at his bullet wound, and I saw, no, this is not a bullet wound. This is him drunk, because he stunk like hell of alcohol, falling down the stairs, coming down and hitting that corner of the wall and making a hole in his head, probably breaking his neck. And then the cop said, well, that's great, Barbara. We don't have to investigate a homicide or look for a murderer, but what about all these shell casings? So we took a look, and we went out in the backyard, and there on the fence in the alleyway was a big target. Turns out that kids would stand out in that hallway with a .22 rifle and do target practice out the back door of the alleyway. So those shell casings had nothing to do with his death. They were a red herring. But everyone was quite happy because now they didn't have to go look for a murderer.
It was, I think, learning more about how your role in all of that and the role you play in investigation, I thought was fascinating. It's something, I mean, personally, I always find it interesting to learn about. And I was also wondering, you mentioned briefly before we got started, and also throughout your book, I wonder if you could talk a bit about how your time and your job changed. Like, because you had mentioned you were the second woman hired as the role of the death investigator in Manhattan, and the first to last more than, I think, just like 2-3 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the end of the book, no spoiler. But in the book, there sounds like there's more female presence in the field. There's more, I mean, technology is playing a bigger. Could you talk a bit about during your time there, how your role or the field transformed, I guess?
You know, when I first started out, as you said, it was a man's game, and being the only woman there was a little difficult. I recall the first time I went out on a scene by myself, and the detective stopped me at the door and said, "Yeah, how can I help you, honey?" I said, "Oh, I'm from the medical examiner's office, and I have to do it." And he's like, "Don't worry about it. Crime scene's in there. They've taken care of it." "Oh, no, no, no." Well, the second time that happened, "How can I help you, honey?" I said, "I'll tell you what, you can't help me, but I think I can help you. My name's Barbara Butcher. I'm from the medical examiner's office. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to examine that body. I'm going to tell you what the guy died of, how he died, when he died, and maybe even who did it. And then when you can go to court, and they say, 'Hey, how'd you know all this?' Tell him Barbara Butcher told me. How's that?" He went, "Whoa, okay." And, you know, we had a good time with the cops. Once I was accepted as one of the guys or one of the girls who's one of the guys. And I was accepted pretty quickly, I think. My natural curiosity and my strangeness was interesting to them. You know, this girl who would go around poking at bullet holes. And so pretty soon, you know, we were having a good time, and we'd play jokes on each other. I went to an apartment once where their patrolman was standing out in front of the door, and I decided, I'm going to play a good trick here. I left my case and my jacket outside with my driver. I went and I said, "Hi, I understand there's an apartment for rent. It's rent controlled. It's cheap, right? And it's a 2-bedroom. Could I see it?" He said, "Lady, what are you doing? Please stop." I said, "No, I heard someone just died in there, and the apartment's going to be available. Can I look at it?" He was horrified. "Lady, what's the matter with you?" I said, "Please, please, I've been looking for an apartment for so long. It's so hard to find a 2-bedroom in New York, please." He said, "All right, take a look." I said, "Butcher, medical examiner," and pulled my shield out. So, you know, most of the time our dark humor and the interesting work kept us going. But over the years, things started getting to me. Too many kids killed. Too many young women raped, murdered. Too many men dying of strange and silly accidents. Just too many deaths. Too many homicides. Back then, when I started out, we were getting 2,400 homicides a year. Can you imagine that? Now that you don't even get 400 in the city, but 2,400. So every day I was seeing someone murdered. I was seeing a tragedy. And it started getting to me real bad. And then there was 9/11. Just as things were really going bad, you know, the universe said, "Well, you're having trouble with single deaths? Let me smack you in the face with 3,000. And you may have heard that saying that one death is a tragedy, 1,000 deaths is a statistic. When you're crawling through a smoking, burning heap of rubble looking for body parts of human beings, and you find a little desk calendar that says lunch with Jim Tuesday at 1, or the graduation picture of an elementary school kid in a little frame from somebody's desk, or I found a desk set with a pen and a golf ball, the souvenir of a hole-in-one. These are people. Every single life is a universe unto itself, with family and friends, and it was just an ordinary day at work with all their little things around them. And then the most unthinkable deaths. And oh boy, did that ruin me. I think for most Americans, it deeply affected us because our sense of safety was gone, our sense of power. And it was pretty overwhelming. I think that really screwed me up kind of bad.
You spent a year working during, because I was rereading the chapters on your time dealing with 9/11 and the recovery efforts. And I had just been rereading it on Monday, and it was poignant to read.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like that day. 9/11, I do a media blackout. No television, no social media, nothing. I don't like to hear about it or think about it. It was just really, really awful. But, you know, fate comes along and took me off the streets. My boss said, we need to promote you. You're going to be director of investigations and you're going to be director of forensics. And so that, you know, they needed more help as we hired more people to deal with this huge tragedy. So being pulled off the street was good for me. Gave me a chance to calm myself a little, you know, work a desk job. Then, of course, we started having other mass fatalities and, well, back you go into the plane crash, into the tsunami. But, you know, there's a way out. And it probably from my first week, I was watching the autopsy of an 8-year-old girl who'd been raped and smothered. And I spoke to the pathologist doing the case, Dr. Jackie Lee. And I asked her, how the hell do you do this every day and continue living, having your life? She said, Barbara, what you have to do is every single day when you leave here, surround yourself with things of beauty, art, music, love, food, dancing, everything creative. It's the only way that you can push back the death, despair, and destruction. Just surround yourself with beauty. And she was so right. Learning to live in the moment and not think about death and horror. Learning to appreciate a good sunrise. Or I got a little house in the country where I had a dog and 2 cats and some grass and trees. And I think that pulled me out of despair, especially the dog and cats, you know.
I was curious before, and I want to encourage everyone who's watching. We've had so many people write in that they've loved, people who've read the book that loved it, and people that haven't read it yet who are very eager to after hearing you this evening. I was wondering if you could talk real quick, and please make sure to submit your questions if you have any. What inspired you to write this book now? You know, it's been a few years since you've been out of that field. What inspired you to write this?
COVID, pretty much. I retired some years ago, and I had a consulting business, helping families, you know, investigate unsolved deaths and things like that. And the business pretty much died out during COVID, and I had nothing to do. And then it came to me one day, damn, you know, you could die from this. And then all these stories you've been carrying around inside you will never be told. So you better start writing them down now. So it was a perfect time. I was alone here anyway, pretty much. My partner's very quiet. So, you know, I just started writing, and all through COVID for 2 years, I just wrote, and worked out for me. And I didn't die.
I feel like you must have so many stories that didn't quite make this book.
Hundreds and hundreds of stories. Yeah.
That's what I kept, as I was reading it, I was like, I know there has to be so much more, because if this is just what included here, I was like, the amount that was left in the editing room floor just didn't even make it. It has to be astonishing.
Yep. Many more chapters that the editor said, put it aside, we'll do something else.
Sounds good. All right, we have some questions, and I'll get to them because there's a few I don't want to miss out. Sorry. All right. So we have a question from Carolyn, who would like to know, you talk a lot about a lot of the cases you dealt with, and especially some of them that are, you know, I guess the ones you have to push away or push aside all of the feelings so you could be more science-based rather than your gut reaction. Carolyn would like to know, was there ever a case that made you feel afraid, and how did you handle that?
A lot of cases made me afraid. I'm still scared all the time. That's just PTSD though. Yeah. There was a case where the whole family was slaughtered. The mother and the father were dead in the living room, and a 12-year-old boy was dead in the bedroom, all of them shot. And hiding behind a curtain was a 3-year-old who had walked through his parents' blood and left his tiny footprints and his little toe prints throughout the apartment in his parents' blood. Turned out to be drug dealers. There was a 17-year-old kid in the family who was working for them. And I guess he didn't turn in the right amount of money or something, so they killed his whole family. And I can never get those tiny footprints out of my mind until the day I die. But what scared me so much was the knowledge that this is business. This is what people do. You kill a whole family, including a kid. That kind of evil in the world is a little much to take, and there's plenty of it.
Yeah, I would say that'd be a lot. Come face to face with that and to then go back home and
Yeah.
try to live your life, that would be near impossible, I would say, for most people.
Mhm.
A very hard pivot from that question. There, a lot of people are asking, Shami would like to know, what do you miss most about the job? I mean, we've talked
Mm.
about worst case and the hard cases, but what do you miss most about it?
Oh, I do miss the job. I really do. The first thing I miss is the people I worked with. We shared something that was unspeakable. We saw things that no one else saw, and we dealt with things that other people would never imagine. So it gave us a closeness that I can't replicate anywhere else, like a family. But the other thing I miss is being relevant in the world, doing something that matters. I helped put away some bad people, some bad murderers. I helped families who were in despair, and that was good. That was important. And I felt like I was doing something that mattered. So right now, I don't feel so relevant. You know, a book is fun, but well, maybe it can change something. I don't know. We'll see.
I think, I mean, I find the book inspirational. And especially I feel like there's
Mm.
people who might be looking into this field or people who that have a same natural curiosity to you that maybe they didn't come think about this and stuff. I think you are inspiring future people into your career and with the passion that you write about. I mean, I think it makes other people want to help.
I hope so. And maybe some people who are thinking about their drinking will also read it and see what marvels can happen when you stop drinking your life away, how you can get jobs and go places. And yeah, maybe.
I think so. I mean, at least I was reading and I was just touched not only by your passion for your job, but how you've reinvented your life and
Mm.
pivoted in such an amazing way. Um, Carolyn wrote, she hopes the book results in changes in support and help for last responders, which you talk about, especially the importance of that. Do you think help will come, or do you think there's going to be more support offered to these people who have to deal with the sites and
Mm.
everything that you've done?
You know, that was one of the reasons for writing the book. I wanted the public to understand what cops, firemen, death investigators, coroners, what they go through and how it alters your spirit and crushes your heart sometimes. But there is help. Back in my day, I remember my boss, I said, "Hey, boss, you know, the guys are drinking, gambling. They're really having a rough time with this 9/11 thing." He said, Barbara, we're strong people. We're tough. We don't need any help. I said, okay, well, he was wrong. He was very wrong. We needed a lot of help. Nowadays, things are different. In the New York City office, they have peer groups to talk about cases, and just sometimes just getting it off your head, getting out of your mind, talking about things really helps. They have what do you call those? Oh, therapy dogs. They bring dogs to the office so people can pet them. I mean, I think that's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. There's yoga classes and meditation and all kinds of things. And New York is a very progressive office, so I hope that the rest of the country, I mean, I know Las Vegas and LA are doing this too for their first responders and last responders like me. So I hope it catches on.
I hope so as well, especially hearing about what you've gone through and have to process. I feel like first and last responders definitely could use support, even if they don't say they need it.
Yeah, we never say we need it.
No. I'm trying to go through, we have a bunch. Um, oh goodness, I'll wait on that one. Someone would like to know, Mary would like to know, if you had to do it all over again, would you? And would you change anything?
Mm. You know, I think about that sometimes. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an actress. That was a little thing that happened when I was around 16, 17 years old. I thought, oh, I want to be an actress. My dad said, nah, you're not going to be a damn actress. You got to go make a living. And sometimes I think, wow, that would have been a fun job, acting. Then I think, no, I was led exactly to where I needed to be and to do what I needed to do. I had a purpose, which is, something that I miss now, but I don't think that I would change anything. I would take the exact same job, but I would probably take a lot better care of myself. I would insist on having, even peer counseling, just sitting around having coffee and talking about cases. I would insist on regular health checkups, and maybe like a once a month dinner where we all got together and just acted human, the cops, the firemen, medical examiners, just get together and talk. I probably would have done that differently. And I wouldn't have eaten so much candy. I don't know if you know, but candy is like opiates. And there were times when I was stressed out, I would send my driver out and say, even in 2:00 in the morning, please find me a supermarket that's open and get me a bag of Smarties. Smarties are little sugar tablets with citric flavor, and bags of them. They come from Canada. And I would sit there and eat them compulsively until my stomach was sick and I was green with nausea, but I couldn't stop because it distracted me from feeling. And during 9/11, the Salvation Army, they put up like a canteen, a cafeteria out on the street for us, and they fed us, and they gave us bags of candy and cookies and sweets. And I think I gained 14 pounds in the first couple months, but it was a way to keep us calm. Feeding us hamburgers and Kit Kat bars. So yeah, I would have taken a lot better care of myself. Of course, I say that now. And am I taking care of myself now? No, of course not. Do I exercise? Nah, too strenuous.
I think we can all relate to some of that.
Yeah.
We have, oh goodness, I'm trying to go through these and saving some of them for the end. I was wondering, we've had a few, and I know we've touched on it briefly, but could you talk a little bit about advice? I mean, you talked about what you would do differently, but if someone was looking to go into your field, let's say they've read your book, they want to do they want to go into your field, what steps should they take? What would that process look like?
America has a very strange death investigation system. In some parts of the country, all you need is a driver's license and a high school diploma to be elected as county coroner. And they tell you, oh, take some training in your first year, and then maybe they get good training, maybe they don't. A lot of funeral directors work as coroners because they're used to dead folks, but that doesn't mean they have the scientific background. So I would urge anyone interested in the field to first do a little reading on the death investigation system in the United States. Think about what state you want to work in, and then tailor your studies to the laws for that state. To work in New York City or Chicago, Miami, Boston, LA, any of the big cities, you'll need a scientific background in forensic anthropology, as a physician assistant or a nurse practitioner. Yeah, anything in forensics, because once you have that science background, and especially a healthcare background, they will train you in the techniques of investigation. I went through NYPD, their homicide school, their special victims school, cult studies. That was fun. And then I went to the FBI Academy for a week-long course on death investigation there, and I studied all I could. But the investigative skills you can get at your place of employment, at a medical examiner or a coroner's office. But the scientific background, that's what you need to start. Biology, forensic anthropology, etc. And be prepared to be strong. Be prepared to be emotional. And yet put a mask on so that you can do your work. Shut yourself off. Don't cry. Well, you can cry later. Actually, it's pretty good. That's the best. Yeah, wait to cry until later. Yeah. Even cops cry, I did want to say something about the TV question.
Yes.
A lot of times you'll see on television a show about a medical examiner who does autopsies and then runs out and solves cases. That never, ever happens. Medical examiners do autopsies. You can't drop your knives in the middle of a case and run out and look at a homicide. The medical legal death investigators, people like me, we're the ones that go out to the scene, do the investigation, write a report, take the photos, everything, give it to the medical examiner. So now they can do an informed autopsy and determine, is that gunshot wound a suicide, homicide, or an accident? Well, depends on the information I gave them from the scene. So on TV, you don't see medical legal death investigators. You see people going saying, yep, I poked my finger in that bullet hole. Looks like a .45 caliber. Dead about, 3 hours. That's not the way it is. Not at all.
I found myself after reading your book, I was watching just another crime show on streaming, and I was like, well, that's not how that works. I know.
That's
still
right.
fun to watch, but
yeah, it is fun. It is fun. Yeah.
But it's actually, the truth is so much more fascinating. Always.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have a lot of people wanting to know about, do you still mentor people in your field? We have a lot of people that said, in your story, how inspirational and how much it resonates with them. And they want to know, do you still mentor? Do you work with people, reach out to people currently?
Yeah. Through my website, a lot of times I get inquiries from people wanting to know if I'll come and speak at their school. And I just agreed to one yesterday to a high school. That's going to be fun. Sure. I do career days and lectures at schools. I'll be teaching at John Jay, a couple of guest lectures this year in the forensics course. And I think Malloy College also. So yeah, and any person that's getting into the field, that's gotten started on their studies but have questions, you can write to me on my website, and maybe I can steer you in the correct way. It's barbarabutcherauthor.com is my website, and I answer all my emails there.
Put the link in the chat for people in case they would like to check out your website, where you can also read more about your career and everything, which is I got lost going down that today. It was fun. Um, see everything. We have a few more questions that we considered. Someone would like to know, have you considered doing a podcast? Because they've greatly enjoyed listening to you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've been a guest on a lot of podcasts, and a few people have asked, do I want to do a podcast of my own? No, I don't want to do any more work. I love being a guest. I love talking to folks. But I don't want to do any more work. I've got a TV show in development that I'm working on. We're just in negotiations now. And I think that'll be my next bit of work. And I'll do podcasts as I'm asked to be a guest on them. So,
well, that leads to one of our big questions for this evening, which I won't even name everyone who's written in, or I've had the same one myself, is one thing I took from reading your book is how you've been able to pivot your life, whether from your path to discovering to getting to be a death investigator to what is next with you. What's your next plan? We have a lot of people who want you to write a second volume if they want to know more.
yeah.
What do you have next? You mentioned a show.
Yeah. One thing people should know, I mean, I'm elderly. Let's just leave it at that. And I realized just a few years ago that life has so many chapters. It's not like it used to be where you worked, you retired, and then you just sat there. We're too good for that. We have too much going on in our lives. I didn't start the Death Investigator chapter until I was 40 years old when I got that job. And people say to me sometimes, oh, I can't get that job even though I love it because I'm 40 already. And I say, what the hell are you talking about? You're young. I'm going to keep going from one chapter to the next. I mentioned to you before that I took some acting lessons for fun. I love doing it. I love going up on stage and doing a little play. I met a lot of nice people. So I'll do that for fun. I'll work on the TV show. And I don't know that there's a book 2 of this one. Once you see the ending, you see that it's a little difficult to shift, but I am working on a novel based on a true case, and that'll be my next book.
Well, I definitely look forward to reading that, and we would love to have you back to talk about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the one thing that is just so evident while reading your book is just the enthusiasm you have for not only your job, but whatever you're doing at that time.
Mm.
You talked a bit about, you mentioned acting and just in being able to be enthusiastic and about what you're doing is inspiration.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. There's no point in being bored. There's so much to do. There's so much to see. And
your life has not been boring.
yeah. I mean, I'm a scaredy cat too. Believe it or not, I'm scared to do certain things, but I do them anyway. Because what's the point of sitting here? There's so much to see in the world, and there's so much to try. So I am usually quite enthusiastic about whatever I do for however long it lasts. I mean, I took up tango dancing for a while, but that didn't last too long. I was very enthusiastic in the beginning, but I was not a good dancer. So I had to let that go. I tried horseback riding. I thought, oh, I'll be a wonderful middle-aged woman galloping through the forest, my hair streaming behind me. No, I fell off all the time. So it was fun while I lasted, but I love trying new things.
Wow. I just want to thank you. I'm trying to we have people who are writing in who would want to know where they can get their hands on a copy of your book. I put the link in the chat. If you'd like to purchase it from our local independent bookstore, the Learn It Owl, the link is there. And yes, I just want to thank you again, Barbara, for joining us this evening. This has been a delightful time talking about some grisly things.
Yeah.
We also have a lot of people who want to know more details about some of the cases you touched on briefly tonight. I will say the book talks a lot goes into more detail in a descriptive way, but not overly squeamish. So if you have a sensitive stomach for it, it was not so.
Yeah, I try to keep it not too gory. And yeah, you can find the book everywhere, bookstores, online, Amazon, all those things, but support your local bookstore.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we'd love to have you back to discuss your future works.
Thank you so much, Alexander. It's been a pleasure. Good night, everyone, and
Good night,
thanks for your
everyone. Thank you
questions.
so much for joining us. Have a good evening, and we hope to see you soon. Bye, everybody.